Welcome back, FM Talk 106.5 and Mobile Mornings. And pleasure again to welcome Brian Comer from Tobias and Comer Law in our studios here at FM Talk. And this is, of course, Law 251. We have it every month. And back in studio. Had a great time these last couple months coming to visit you down on Dolphin Street at your office. So that was just great. You guys have a beautiful place there. It was really cool to come see where you work day in and day out.
Yeah, thanks. We enjoyed having you, obviously, and it is a pretty building, but also good to be back here in the studio.
Yeah, we have the microphones here. A little easier to saddle up, but yeah, that was great. And if anyone missed that, by the way, it was kind of a special, really, where we took you through the whole process from the first call to Tobias and Comer all the way through the end of your time in court. So that was really good, but go back and listen. It's at fmtalk1065.com and tobiascomerlaw.com. Well, welcome back in. I know we have plenty more to discuss, as we do every month, and something that I know you've been thinking about, and we've talked about it here, are delivery trucks. I mean, they're ubiquitous at this point. They're everywhere. Yep. And now, even beyond that, it's almost like there aren't enough delivery trucks to deliver. We see people in their own personal vehicles doing the Uber Eats and the, they have all these different, what's the other one? Grubhub.
Right.
So the trucks are still out there, though, and they're different than the 18-wheelers. Want to kind of discuss, what that landscape is now like out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, with all the, with all of these different services that have popped up, there are different kinds of vehicles. Sometimes, we've talked about a lot with commercial motor vehicles. Typically people in 18-wheelers have commercial driver's licenses. There's additional schooling that goes in with that. And folks who are in the bigger box trucks also have to have a CDL. Well, sometimes you get, like you mentioned, if somebody's on a contract basis and driving for, whichever the delivery companies they drive for, they might not be as skilled or as experienced. And then, one thing, and I always like to think of it too from like both sides of the spectrum. If somebody is driving for one of those services, they really need to make sure that and they're in a personal car, they want to make sure that their insurance is straightened out and is alerted to that, because there's typically exclusions for that cover or for coverage if they are driving like that. And that's true also for Uber or for Grubhub or those services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder about that all the time. The folks who make a living driving, how many more opportunities, and I say that like it's a positive thing, but the chances of something bad happening obviously go up the longer you're on the road every single day. So I've wondered about that. But these delivery trucks, we think of 18-wheelers on the interstate, high speed, switching lanes. With delivery trucks, it's really a different scenario. I mean, it's often neighborhoods and just driving around town. What kinds of situations tend to lead to accidents with these delivery trucks?
Yeah, so I mean, you make a really good point there, and I actually saw this just today before we came down here on Dolphin Street. One of the delivery companies stopped right there in front of our office, and and unlike say a bus stop where there's you've got signs that say, okay, this is where that is going to happen. It's very unpredictable on the road, and we always have to be mindful, and we talk about defensive driving and all that kind of stuff, but the rear end collision is still one of the highest or most frequent types of crashes. But then there's also the pulling out, if it's a blind curve or maybe somebody didn't look twice or something, pulling out in front of traffic.
And times like we see around here all the time, really foggy mornings, foggy evenings, that can cause some issues too. Yeah. When you come up on a vehicle, you're not used to being there. And a lot of these drivers, we've also talked about these delivery windows. They're under a lot of pressure sometimes to get out and get those packages to those homes. Does that pressure sometimes contribute to risky driving?
Yeah, I think so. And then, in fact, that was kind of a big deal about one of the pizza delivery places when we were growing up. It's 30 minutes or less or your pizza's free. Same kind of thing here. What they found, they had to get rid of that I think we've talked about this, they had to get rid of that program because it was increasing accidents because they were trying to beat the clock. Well, so you also have that same kind of deal here. here with, AI and technology, everything's great, right? Except now we know just kind of what a window we're talking about for deliveries. And so you say, okay, well, you've got 38 seconds to make this delivery from the time you hit park or whatever the number is. It's all measured out into metrics and it's all being recorded. And so the drivers have this constant push to get the packages out. And I mean, I've heard some horror stories about how they don't even have time to, stop for a restroom break or something like that because it's so regimented on the clock. And just like we've talked about before, when people have that additional pressure and you're in a bigger vehicle, that is a recipe for disaster in terms of wrecks.
I had been wondering, what happened to the 30 minutes or less. So we'll have to do a deep dive and have you come back on
with some deep dish maybe. But
deep dive with the deep dish.
That's right.
Talking with Bryan Comer from Tobias and Comer Law and another edition of Law 251 here. So if someone is involved in an accident with a delivery truck, figuring out who's at fault, figuring out who's responsible, that's maybe not as easy always as people think, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you see, a nationally branded vehicle, that's pretty easy, and whatever the company is. But the Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Transportation, regulates those kind of over-the-road trucks, and so where you'll see, if you look at the door, it'll say who's the owner of the vehicle, what's the DOT number, that sort of thing. You get into a little bit different scenario though when you have these contractors, and we really see this a lot more at the holidays, where say a particular delivery service doesn't have enough vehicles to meet the demand because people are buying so much stuff, and so that's part of the deal that we then have to unwind when we get a case like this and say, okay, well, is the person driving for someone else? There's certain tests that apply that even though they're an independent contractor, okay, so John, who's driving his van or whatever for this company, the company may still nonetheless have liability, and so that's part of our investigative process is figuring out, okay, who is it that's ultimately calling the shots here? Where is it that we need to look? And that's what we do.
There's so much data now. I mean, all it takes is for you to hop into a vehicle that was made after, I'll just say 2024.
Sure.
And it's apparent how much new tech is in there. And that's before you even get under the hood or in the black box that these car makers are able to see. So you're able to get a peek at that. I mean, you're able to see the information that these vehicles pick up when you're looking into a case that's been brought to you. Has that made it easier for you and, say, the attorneys at Tobias and Comer Law, all of this information that you're able to gather when there's an accident like this, or has it made things harder in a way?
Well, I mean, it makes things scarier. I can say that because you see these data points, and we've had some cases and seen other cases that it's scary when you see what people are actually doing behind the wheel sometimes. And we talk about, best practices and that sort of thing. But they are tracking all of these metrics. And we're not just talking speed. It's now, are their eyes diverted off the road?
Oh, wow.
I mean, the sensors and all that they're using register all kinds of things. But then the companies are tracking that in real time. And so obviously, what we always want to make sure we do is get to the truth and find out, okay, what is it that happens? And we've talked about this a lot, people have come to us and say, well, I was in a crash or I had this thing happen to me. Well, just because that happened doesn't mean necessarily it's a case. And so that's why we do the investigation. What the data does is it gives us a clearer picture of, okay, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked about this, that, some of the least reliable information from a scene is eyewitness testimony. And somebody thinks, oh, well, I had the green light, or somebody says, oh, I remember it this way. Well, that might not be, how it went down, and that's what the data shows. And it's crazy. I mean, we've got a case right now where there was a wreck on the interstate, and the truck had a camera recording the entire thing as it happened, a dash cam.
Wow.
And you can see the entire crash happen, and it lays out exactly what happened.
That is something else. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of apps out there where parents can keep tabs on their children's driving. So if by the time mine are driving age, and by then I'm sure the auto driving will have taken over the world, but if I can get that data on how often they're looking at the road, that would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure I wouldn't want my parents to see mine when I was 16.
No. At all.
You're looking at the dash an awful lot. What were you, changing music? Maybe.
Sort of, yeah.
But that information that's out there now is crazy. And you've talked about how you guys have utilized that at Tobias and Comer Law. What about, for all of us that are out there every day sharing the road with these delivery truck drivers, what are some things you think people should just keep in mind hand on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that we talk about, have patience, treat other people like you want to be treated and to be defensive, drive defensively. You want to make sure that you're anticipating because, the other person is under such a hurry or is in such a hurry, maybe they just missed you, and that doesn't excuse the conduct. That doesn't excuse what then happens. But thinking of that and think, okay, is this truck going to see me? Or are they going to see me? And just take a breath, take it a little slower and let it pass.
I love that. And I try to abide by that.
Same.
You see these delivery truck drivers out there, especially certain times of the year when it's 105 degrees, or the other end of the spectrum when it's 28, we've seen too. Right. You go, man, they're out there day in and day out. Some pretty dangerous spots. I'm going to give them a little room while I'm working through this neighborhood.
And it's all about having grace, right?
Yeah.
I mean, treat other people like you want to be treated. And they do an essential job for us. And Lord knows we keep them in business at my house. And so, we want to make sure that we're extending that grace. But then, that's all we can do is to take care of ourselves.
All right. So if someone is involved in an accident that's involving a delivery truck, what's the process? What do you recommend they do?
Yeah. So, always, obviously stop. You'd be surprised at the people who don't think to stop. If you've been in a crash, you have to stop. You can't flee the scene of an accident, but get the other driver's information, cooperate with the police, and then, after everything is done, we talk about they do need to get to us as soon as they can so that we can collect evidence and make sure that the scene's preserved and things like that and collect that data, and then also to put the companies on notice to say, hey, you do have this data, don't get rid of it. Okay. And we send letters called spoliation letters where we say that. And so do that. And then, the main thing is to take care of yourself and do what your doctors are telling you to do.
All right. Really, really good stuff again, Brian, and we appreciate it. And that phone number, it's a free consultation. Folks can call it 24/7, and the number is 251-432-5001. But every podcast episode we do, including this one, goes to the website, TobiasComerLaw.com. But there's so much more beyond that that's on the website with great reference guides and news stories, and then, of course, all the contact and about us information about you guys there at Tobias & Comer. Really appreciate your time coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me, Dalton.
All right, that's Brian Comer with Tobias & Comer Law and another edition of Law 251 right here on FM Talk 106.5. Coming up next, the Jeff Poor Show. He's on the way, and more Mobile Mornings tomorrow morning at 6. We'll be back.